This is Pixelated Audio, episode 109, and today we're listening to the music of Japan Pro Golf Tour 64. Welcome back to the show. You're listening to Pixelated Audio, a podcast focusing on game audio, its history, and the people behind it. We're your hosts. I'm Gene, and with me is Brian.
Thanks for joining in, guys. Today we're going to be listening to the soundtrack of a title that was released on the 64 disc drive called Nippon Pro Golf Tour 64, or Japan Pro Golf Tour 64. It's a really chill soundtrack that we think you guys are going to like. That track that brought us in was the opening theme, composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa.
Yep, and right from the first chords, you can see the sun just coming right up on the horizon. It's the morning time. Light is just shining on the golf course.
Yep, and all these people that are out to watch a golf match or golf tournament, maybe they're just there for the symphony, because this is a pretty big golf track.
It is, and actually it's really unlike anything else in the rest of the soundtrack. Most of it's a little bit more down-tempo. This is very... I don't even know, just
orchestral. The timpanis come in, and it's like, wow, it's all right.
Yeah, it's epic and triumphant. I'm ready to win the championship.
Yeah, it's a little bit more. The whole soundtrack is pretty mellow, but this one kind of goes above and beyond, I think, to create this kind of grand, championship golf pro match kind of thing. So I think that it was a cool way to start out the game. You really see the course in the intro kind of in this nice 3D zooming around different camera angle, like Mario 64.
Exactly. It's like the intro, really nice. The attract mode, whatever. It's for a split second, it almost sounds like Link from Zelda's going out to go on the golf course. But,
right. The Links.
Yes, of course.
Sorry. Anyways, so let's talk about this game a little bit. Developed by SETA Corporation and published by Media Factory, Japan Pro Golf Tour 64 was released on the short-lived Japanese-only Nintendo 64 DD add-on in May of 2000. And why did we pick this game again?
So one of the reasons is because we wanted to do a focus on a system that we don't talk about very often. We've been interested in digging into systems that don't get as much coverage, ones that have either a few games or kind of forgotten about. So the 64DD came up as a candidate.
And that was kind of the idea of this whole show, that Pixelated Audio. But, over time, we just wanted to get more stuff that we were interested in. That would kind of float around to a lot of different systems that we would kind of see making a normal appearance on the show. So I'm glad that we're taking a break from some of the normal FM stuff and jumping into 64 disc drive.
Yeah, and there's only 9 games for it. So if it does make an appearance, then we'll have covered 11% of the library at a time, right?
Yeah, and so like I was saying, there's a little bit of a discrepancy because when we were doing the research for this episode, the developer was listed as Media Factory, or in some cases Nintendo, EAD, and the publisher was SETA Corporation. Now, we started really looking into it, and there's really not a lot of information on this game floating around. But after kind of looking at the differences and what was actually happening, like if you look at the manual and stuff, it leads us to believe that everybody has it kind of flopped. And it would make a whole lot more sense for SETA to do the development and Media Factory to do the publishing, because Media Factory was a Japanese publisher primarily focused on anime, manga, film, music, and occasionally some video games. They would put out a few, but their big stuff was doing like anime like Steins Gate, the animated series, Devil May Cry, Senran Kagura, Queen's Blade, and there's like 100 other series that they've worked on. Their game stuff is very minimal, and it's just published stuff. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to do development work. They did a few games. There was Sakura Taisen for Game Boy in 2000, Monet, The Mystery of Orangery in 2000 as well, Columns on the Game Boy, and Columns again in 1999, the console version, Wizardry 1, 2, and 3, Story of Lilgamen in 1999. So there's not a lot of game stuff that they actually worked on. I feel like I've seen that name before, but I guess not. I think that the bigger player here is really SETA, and they contributed to a lot more.
Yeah, actually, so SETA is short for Super Entertainment and Total Amusement and was founded in October 1st of 1985 as a games development and publishing company.
That's a very Japanese name to me.
It is, yeah.
Super Entertainment and Total Amusement.
Just a long acronym for something. And so it seems most likely because SETA has made games for the Japanese and US markets and occasionally Europe, but they've almost exclusively been known as a publisher and developer of golf and puzzle games.
Right.
So
there you go.
You know, if anybody made the game, it's probably them of the two. Right. When I was looking at the research for Media Factory, I think I found like 3 games, period. So, Now they have been kind of in the peripheries in the game development world, but you've probably heard of a few of these games. I'm going to go through a couple. They started out making games on the Famicom or NES in the mid-'80s with titles like J.B. Harold Murder Club, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Eight Eyes, and Silva Saga, and maybe famously, the unreleased Bioforce Ape. It was sort of an internet legend for a few years, and then it actually came to be. There was a cartridge, and turns out that the game was pretty much ready to go, and you can... If you know where to look, you can play it. Yeah,
it's like a lot of prototypes. You know, they're kind of like scrapped at the last minute because of funding or just interest or
it was too late in the system and they didn't think they were going to sell enough or whatever. That was probably what they were most well known for on the NES.
Right.
So on the Game Boy, and both of these were published and released in the US, they had Cubillion and Battle Bull. On the Super NES, they had Nosferatu in both Japan and the US, F1 Rock, Race of Champions, so 1 and 2, and Silva Saga 2, which was only in Japan, but they actually developed that one instead of just publishing it. Mm-hmm. They also published The Wizard of Oz, Kakoma Night, Kendo Rage, and Musia, the classic Japanese tale of horror. All of these were published in English, but they're not really big titles, so... Right. You may not know too much about them.
The only reason why I know Kendo Rage is because my wife did Kendo for so many years. And so this title stuck out to me, but I didn't know about it until, you know, after we started dating. So it wasn't a big one.
I may have rented it, but I don't really remember. And in any case, for the N64, they also developed the game Chopper Attack and published the Japanese-only Tetris 64. And their last game was Legend of Golfer on the GameCube in Japan.
Right.
So... that kind of ends their console history, but what's interesting is SETA actually had a pretty big hand in some arcade stuff. There were 2 main arcade platforms that they developed for. The first was the SSV arcade board, which stands for the Sammy SETA Visco, and some of the notable games for that were Drift Out 94, Dynagear, Stormblade, Eagle Shot Golf, Vassara 1 and 2, and maybe most infamously Survival Arts, which was sort of a Mortal Kombat ripoff, which everybody was doing at the time. But that's probably the system game that everybody would maybe know from this.
Right.
And finally, which ties a little bit more closely into what we just talked about, the game, Japan Pro Golf Tour, they also partnered with Nintendo on a short-lived N64-based arcade system called the Alex 64, trying to mimic the success of Namco's System 11. Similar to how Tekken was ported to the PlayStation, they were hoping they were going to port some games to the N64. So the 2 games that are probably most well known here are Magical Tetris Challenge featuring Mickey, later ported.
And that came out in the 64.
It did, yeah. I remember seeing that one a lot on store shelves. There weren't that many N64 games that were really big.
Looks like it came out on Game Boy Color as well.
I think so, yeah. That's what I saw. I didn't look too deeply into all the ports. Yeah, and PlayStation 1. And finally... Star Soldier, Vanishing Earth, which also released on N64, and that's the continuation of the Star Soldier series.
Right.
So, you know, sadly, in 99, they were acquired by Aruz and withdrew from the game business in 2004. In 2008, they were essentially dissolved, and by the middle of 2009, they were totally liquidated.
Ooh. So what happened to all their licenses and stuff?
I believe they were transferred to Aruz, but I don't know if they're just sitting on them probably. I haven't really seen anything from them.
Yeah, and they probably will be that way until the end of time.
You know, all those shogi games got to make a comeback, so maybe we'll see something from them in the near future.
But, you know, it looks like 23 years of their company being together, they produced a lot of stuff.
They did, yeah. They're kind of one of these names that you'll find in random corners. You won't necessarily always expect to see it, but you'll be like, oh, SETA, I think I remember hearing about them.
Right. It's just weird that they got involved in the arcade business from virtually not being involved in it at all in the kind of the early heydays of arcades in the 80s and 90s. So just interesting to me that they decided to kind of make that jump and partner with Visco and stuff. So
yeah, it does sound like they were doing a lot of investment in the 90s. I don't really know. I think they were mostly just strategic moves. I don't think they developed too many games for either of those platforms.
Yeah, and maybe that's why they ended up getting acquired, because it was just they had moved past their focus, and it was no longer kind of a
necessity. And those aren't cheap decisions, investing in arcade boards and stuff like that. So if they don't pay off, maybe you got to pay some debts, and that's kind of where we are today.
Yep. All right. Well, let's get into our next track. This is the menu selection track. So when you start the game, you hear that first track we came in with. You get this really nice panned kind of camera around a golf course. Start the game off, and you're listed with all of your options that you can kind of dive into. This is the menu selection composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa for Japan Pro Golf Tour 64.
That was Menu Selection, composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa for Japan Pro Golf Tour 64 on the 64DD.
Pretty chill track.
You can always rely on golf games to chill you out.
Yeah, I feel like I should just be sitting on the beach. I love it. Pretty nice stereo effects going on. I like the kind of nice little toms on either ear, and there's some interesting instrument selection, but otherwise it's just mellow.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward menu track, if you want. I mean, if that is a genre, and it's kind of elevatory.
Just go to like this live concert and you hear say, that's a really good menu track.
Yeah, it's I don't know. There's not too much to say about it, to be honest.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the game a little bit. Japan Pro Golf Tour 64 is a fairly traditional golf sim on the 64DD. I don't want to compare everything to Hot Shots Golf, but it's a lot like that. I mean, you got all your standard golf things, I guess. You got, clubs, you can different clubs you can pick, your direction, the chip. You have to take into consideration wind direction, the height of the hill that you're golfing to. Is that what they call it? Swinging to? Clubbing to? I don't know the terminology.
I've played a lot of golf games. I don't know a lot about the game of golf.
Yeah, I've played a lot of golf games myself, and I always mess up the terminology. So maybe we're the last people who should be explaining a golf game. But anyways, it's kind of neat though. There's 10 different golf courses, and these are all based on actual golf clubs in Japan. So if you can go to, I think there's like Saitama in there, Tokyo course, a few different ones. I want to say like Kyoto might have one in there, and just all these really kind of famous golf locations. In fact, I never played a game of golf, so I couldn't tell you where they're all at.
This is the same kind of thing that's really common in racing games. They'll have the real tracks, real golf courses, same kind of thing.
Yeah, and unless it's Daytona or is Sega Rally like a real place? No, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so unless like it's something that was on my radar, I'm not sure, but all these places are real places, and I think that's pretty cool. I really like games that at least try to go for some level of realism. If they're sports games, some kind of certain courts or baseball diamonds or, soccer field
sure.
or whatever. I think that's cool.
I appreciate it, but I personally prefer a little bit more of the arcadey gameplay, just where it's a little bit more.
Oh, me too.
Cut out some of the downtime, make it a little bit snappier.
Me too. I'm a big math fan, but there's way too much math involved in these golf games sometimes.
Yeah.
What's really nice too is there's 20 different pro golfers that you can play as, including a create a golfer mode. So you can kind of the faces are. It's kind of like a faux create a golfer because there's only like some set faces you can do. However, what you can do is customize your golfer to have a range of different abilities and different swing techniques and stuff like that. Again, a little bit outside of my comfort zone for playing golf in video games, but some people are very into that, and I think this would kind of resonate with them pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there's 6 different gameplay modes. There's a 1 to 2 player match play mode where you face off against each other. There's a similar mode with 4 players where you play an 18-hole golf course and the person with the lowest score wins. Pretty standard stuff. There's a grand open mode where you compete with the world's best Japan pro golfers. There's 20 golfers that we mentioned. A career mode where you start from the bottom and get to
Work
the top.
your way up.
Yeah, pretty standard. A qualifying tournament where you create your own player with a handicap of 0, meaning so you don't get any bonuses. You pretty much have to play at the top of your game against some of these competitors. And the network open mode where you were actually able to play with other players online for a brief period of time in the year 2000.
Yes. Over the Randnet service.
Yes.
And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's get into some more music. I want to talk more about this golf game, but really play any of the Tiger Woods games or whatever around 2000 and you're pretty much getting the same experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
just substitute the names out for instead of what's a famous golf course here in the US? Pebble Beach. Pebble Beach.
There you go. Yeah, that sounds like one.
Substitute that for Saitama or something, and that's the game. It's interesting nonetheless, and it's even more interesting that it came out in such a flopped system or a flopped add-on. So
yeah, and we'll get to that in a little bit too. Yeah.
So let's get into some more music. This is Course Overview, composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa for Japan Pro Golf Tour 64. All right, that was the course overview from Japan Pro Golf Tour 64 on the 64DD. Pretty jamming little track.
Yeah,
This is a good one.
It is. Yeah, it's one of the longer tracks in the game. It's smooth. Really weird to have the bass bent like that. It's like you really don't hear that very often.
And from everything we've heard so far, this is quite different, right? Because we had that orchestral track bring us in, and then the menu music, which is, dead on menu music. And then we got this, which is just this really just jazzy, laid back, loungy music. I love this one. I thought it was so fun.
Yeah, and it goes through a lot of changes. And, I think I really am always drawn to music that goes through a lot of changes because I just love dynamic music. And it's got jazz and funk and soul elements in there. It's a slick track.
And I think this really is a good testament to Ken'ichiro Shinzawa's work too. I mean, we got this really nice piano kind of key solo in there, and there is like kind of like a horn section. I guess that's a horn. It's really hard to tell. Some of these samples are a little bit muddy, but I like that, you know, kind of dynamic between the two, and I think it sounds really cool. I could have used some more keyboard in there, some like a longer solo, because we know he can get pretty down to down to roots with that.
So this is going to be our chance to talk about Ken'ichiro Shinzawa. This was, for me, my favorite part of doing research for this episode. It was like the more I dug, the more interesting it got. It was crazy.
This is definitely the most interesting thing about the game. Actually, is this composer. He's done so, like, as soon as we started following these little tiny breadcrumbs, all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, this guy's done everything.
I know, he's been everywhere, and he was like Halley's Comet. He came around, did games for a short time, and then went off to do everything else.
Yeah, and thankfully he was listed as the main game composer in the intro as Kei Shinzawa, so it wasn't very hard to find him.
There were not that many people with those initials, actually, surprisingly. And then I looked at his credits, his CV on his website, and like, he had a golf tour game in 1998. I started cross-referencing things. Yeah, it can't be anybody else. It has to be this guy.
It has to be this guy. And then I went through it too to make sure that we were on the same page, and we got everything. And then we were on. G and I did like a Discord phone call, and we were just like going through his stuff, and we kept getting sidetracked because of all this side work we started following into.
We started listening to some of his live performances, and this guy is just wicked on the keyboard.
Right.
So Ken'ichiro was born in Tokyo in 1968. He graduated from high school in 87, and then Tokyo Institute of Technology in 1991 from the Department of Architecture, which
doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't say if he studied music,
architecture,
because I graduated from the College of Letters and Sciences, but what does that say about what I actually have as a degree?
Right.
So during college, he was a member of the big band, the Tokyo Institute of Technology Los Guaracheros, which I looked that up. Guarachero is a person who writes guarachas, which is a genre of music from Cuba and Puerto Rico.
Okay.
So, Afro-Cuban, upbeat, lots of different percussion. There was definitely a trend of that throughout, like, pretty much the 60s to the 80s. So, no surprise. We've even had a couple of musicians on here who have similar credits. And he even received the solo prize at the 20th annual Yamano Big Band Jazz Concert. In 93, he graduated from Tokyo Institute of Technology in their graduate architecture studies major. So he continued with architecture, but was doing music on the side the whole time.
I know. And I think this is a very odd trend. I don't remember who it was that we talked about before, who had also studied architecture, who was a composer, ended up switching majors, or not even switching at all, graduated with an architecture background or degree, and then just got into game audio. Like, I don't remember who it was, but it was like 5 or 6 episodes ago, 6, maybe more.
Yeah, music is a weird place because you have people that are lifelong musicians, and then you have other people that were like, oh yeah,
come from all walks. Yeah,
I studied mathematics, or I studied, it doesn't even matter what, I just went into music. I kind of fell into it.
Yeah.
And so Ken'ichiro is primarily a pianist, and he's an extremely accomplished musician that's worked in almost every medium imaginable. To date, he has 7 studio albums, dozens of performance credits on other albums in styles ranging from jazz, fusion, Brazilian, world, pop, soundtrack, and even techno. He's performed in a number of concerts, including playing piano alongside the Kanagawa Philharmonic Orchestra in 2013.
Yeah. So when you and I were doing, I was saying earlier, we were doing kind of a Skype call or a Discord call, and we started getting sidetracked with all the side work that he's done, all those live concerts and, jazz bar things that, recordings that he had on YouTube.
Yeah, we just typed in his name in YouTube, and like dozens and dozens of videos came up. Yeah.
But this guy is just awesome on keys, and he had this one we were listening to. The song is Liberty City, and it was originally composed by Jaco Pastorius, and he performed this at some bar with the Ginkgo Quintet, which is him. There was bass, violin, or a cello, violinist,
flute, maybe
a clarinet. I think was in it, and and him on the keys. So let's just take a listen to the solo a little bit, give you an idea. sound like a little bit of Tito Puente.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he studied in big band music and jazz, all that stuff.
Yeah. It's cool, man. He's got a lot of really... He has this one that you sent me, actually, where he's playing... Is it the... it's like a electric organ?
Yeah,
like
it's almost like a punk sort of thing. He's just like mashing on these keys and this like... You know, it's like if you go into a bar and you see like bass and drums only, and you're like, you're in for some weird kind of music. That's basically what this was.
Yeah, he was playing this organ, this portable organ, because he was walking around with it, going to town. And some dude just in the back playing a drum set. It was the weirdest thing ever.
But it sounded pretty good.
Yeah, it was really good. And he definitely has skills. I mean, just incredible musician. But he's composed and arranged for all sorts of stuff: TV, music, live theater. He's had television appearances and written articles for several publications, including Jazz Life and Keyboard Magazine.
So here's the PC nerd in me. He actually wrote some demos for Microsoft and Apple back in their heyday, back in sort of like the
early days.
The early days, I guess, sure. And he even had a couple of his demo tracks ship along Roland's SC8820 and SC88 Pro. So you may have heard his music if we were the same age as we were listening to those demo tracks.
So we were going through all of the MIDI tracks to try to figure out which one was him, and it's too hard to tell.
Yeah.
We tried asking him to, but we didn't get a response back in time, because we would have had that in the show for sure.
Absolutely.
But he's not only done all this amazing stuff, but he's also done some video games too.
Yeah, not many. He did one called Yoshimoto Entertainment Orthopedics for Mac in '95, which sounds thrilling.
Yoshimoto, if you're not familiar, do you know where Manzai came from?
Yeah,
it's like
I don't know where it came from, but I think I know what it is.
Well, it came from Yoshimoto. Yoshimoto is kind of like a big Japanese comedy company. It originated in Osaka. It's still there today. I have a picture with me standing right in front of it. They have the characters outside and stuff.
That's pretty cool. He also did the music for Saikyo Habo Shogi for N64 in '95, Super Real Mahjong for Arcade and Saturn in '95 and '97, Kanazawa Shogi for PS1 in '98, and this game, which is listed on his website as PGA Golf in '98, which just shows how late this game actually came out, because it came out in 2000.
Right. So maybe that's what they were going with, PGA.
Yeah.
And they yanked it last minute. I mean, the polygons were so rudimentary, and the textures were so kind of at the time that they could have just done a texture swap, and maybe they were going to do PGA at one point or something, and they're just, we might as well use some pro golfers here.
It's only coming out in Japan, may as well. So this is kind of interesting. He had 2 other performance credits that you might recognize. He was on the Japanese-only Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater pre-order album called Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater: The First Bite, where he played organ on the track Snake Eater, which is based on the same song you know and love, but it has a male vocalist instead of a female vocalist, but he's soloing like crazy on organ towards the middle of the track. Snake Eater! And he's also performed on the Professor Layton and the Curious Village and Professor Layton and the Diabolical Box albums, which were performed with a live orchestra as part of the group the Layton Grand Caravan Orchestra.
Right.
He even performed keys on Hiroki Kikuda's recent album Angelic Fortress Trismegistus in 2016. Yeah, I actually bought the album from his Bandcamp.
Well, you're a huge Secret Amana fan.
I am, and Hiroki Kikuda is a personal favorite. But he re-released both of the Angelic Fortress albums with new rearrangements with live performance, and this guy got on it. Shinzawa's there.
Totally.
Just kind of
he's everywhere.
He's everywhere. And he is even now in 2014 a part-time instructor at the Showa University of Music.
Yeah.
Crazy.
This is one awesome guy.
I know. And he's performing live today. You can look on his website and find show dates for upcoming performances as of this recording right now.
Right. And I think he has an album coming out in April. unless he was talking about April last year, but looks like he's got a new one coming out. So lots of stuff.
Very cool guy. Yeah,
a lot of Ellington stuff on there, and a
lot of jazz arrangements that he's done over the years.
Yeah, and it shows in his music style too, because like when he plays not only when he plays jazz, obviously, but when he plays different kind of genres, you can hear those jazz solos.
Yeah, those influences are very apparent. So let's get into another track. This is Tournament Exhibition from Japan Pro Golf Tour 64.
That was Tournament Exhibition, composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa. You know, I feel like I know this guy now. Like I know his style. I know how, like, what he's thinking when he's composing. I don't know any of it, but I feel like I'm connected to it somehow.
Well, after we dug into his history, you can see this is a guy who's performed a lot of music, because there's so much great video game music written, but a lot of it you can tell is by somebody who wrote on a computer.
Right, like by themselves in their own studio.
Yeah.
This guy sounds like he's taking what he knows from his live performances and applying it. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, and especially with that intro, it's almost so empty. You're like, is the rest of the track even going to be anything? And then it just keeps picking up and building on itself, and some really interesting patch choices, like the kind of a steel string thing, the flutes.
Yeah, and then the ending where the strings are just kind of bouncing around in your ears. It's just really interesting track.
It's a little out of place, but in a way that it's like, not in a bad way. It's fitting, but it caught me off guard the first time I heard it. I was not expecting that.
Right. So let's talk about the 64DD a little bit. The best words to describe it is an utter failure. But this game was even more unique because it was only available for a few weeks through credit card purchasing through Nintendo of Japan's online store. Sales were like 3,000 to 10,000 copies, and that's about it. So not a lot of people even played this or got to hear his music until, this episode.
Yeah. I mean, you're lucky. We're bringing it straight from the source.
Yeah, and so on that note, we do want to say a big thanks to Hard for Games for supplying us hardware recordings of what you're hearing today. So it's really great. I mean, like the N64, we've kind of said, about some of the sound sample choices and quality, but there are some really, really good stuff, and I think this is a good testament to that. So yeah, there weren't a lot of copies of this game sold. Not a lot of people heard it, and there were even fewer that that probably played online, because that was just a disaster waiting to happen as well. So real quick, we haven't mentioned the 64DD on the show before. And again, there's only 9 games, nine actual games.
Some of them are almost more like tech demos or creator games, like the Mario Artist series, which have some really interesting music. We might get into that one day.
Yeah. So maybe one day. In fact, we were thinking about going that route, and then we heard this, and we're like, oh,
yeah, let's keep it to something relaxing.
Yeah. So what is the 64DD? The 64DD is a disk drive add-on. It was released in 1999 for the Nintendo 64. The discs kind of resemble a zip disk. Do you happen to remember those?
I do, but I was lucky enough not to be doing anything on them because I know they died pretty easily.
They had a high failure rate, but compare that to floppies. Floppies were worse, man. Like, I had floppies go bad all the time.
Yeah, all the time.
But zip disks were great. They, hold, I think the first one I had was like 100 megabytes. I was like, what? I could put like everything I'd ever need on here. And,
those were the days.
Those were the days. And even before the N64 was released, the 64DD had been announced. It was already in the pipeline for release. So this isn't something that was like this, oh, we should, add this on to the N64 or at the end of its life or anything. No, this was kind of premeditated before the N64 was even on shelves, so they had this in mind. They knew they wanted to do something with it. So why did Nintendo even need or care about this expandability? And there's a few things here. So with the N64, Nintendo knew that they had a powerful system, but they knew that there were also some really serious limitations and serious expenses that came with the cartridge format, right? So even though cartridges are fast compared to the competition using CD-ROM, like Saturn and PlayStation, they were also very expensive, and they would take months of lead out time for production. You get the cart, you burn it to a ROM, you send your thing in. It's got to be mass produced, right? If you have any problems, you have to kill production. You have to start all over. It's a very time consuming process, and a few months to lead out a game, it could be up to 3 or 4 months. That's like an eternity when you're waiting to kind of rake in profit from something, right?
Yeah, and I mean, everybody knows cartridges were pretty expensive to make in comparison to CDs, so it was already a big gamble just on the N64 alone.
Right, not just to consumers, right? So they also have really low capacity. When the initial development of the 64DD took place, the cartridge standard was 4 megabytes.
Right, so that's on the N64.
N64. 4 megabytes is not a lot of space, especially if you want to make a richer experience. And that's what they were going for with this system, right? Compare that to the 64 megabytes on the magnetic disk or the disk drive disks, and that opens a floodgate of different possibilities. Still not as much space as like a CD, but it loads significantly faster. And it wasn't only a significant expansion for game data, but also for user data. So the standard N64 memory card couldn't handle more than like a few kilobytes, right? Mm-hmm. But with a writable medium like the disk drive, users could store their own levels or art creations, like in Mario Artist, for example, like you were just mentioning. You can create your own levels and save music or whatever you did.
Customizability was a huge part of the system. One of the games released was F-Zero-X with, I forget what it was called, but it was essentially with track creators.
Right, exactly. So, and you could save that to a writable disk system, right? But they tried to do this with the Famicom disk system, and it was pretty successful in Japan. It never made its way here, but they kind of had the same thing in mind with the 64DD. And I think that they were kind of leveraging that success on the Famicom disk system and thinking that maybe it would have its own spot, right, for the more, the next generation. A few other benefits were the real-time clock. And at a time when this wasn't a common thing, a real-time clock was really important because you could have persistent game worlds. So say you have Animal Crossing or something, it really could take use of that real-time clock and not rely on something in the cartridge.
So that's an interesting thing. There was an Animal Crossing released in Japan for the N64.
Right.
But it was initially planned for the 64DD. But it was a lot of... Actually, this is actually something that happened with a lot of games, is if they were released, they were pretty much downgraded to a cartridge and released for the N64 proper because there just wasn't enough of an install base to justify it on the DD. That's why there were so few games that came out. I think only about... The estimates are about 10,000 64DDs were released or sold.
Right.
Something maybe 15,000. Really not that many.
It was very slim. And A few other things that Nintendo was looking at to kind of offload some of the disk space was the enhanced audio and font libraries. And these libraries could be accessed by either cart-based games or disk-based games to kind of offload some of that extra memory from the cartridges or the disk drive to that attachment or that add-on itself. Another big thing for the 64DD was the modem attachment. And the cartridge came with the system, but you could buy a bundle that included the Randnet modem, and it allowed you to connect online. And that was a 28.8 modem. In 2000, man, it was
really slow.
It was very slow because even the Dreamcast came out with a 56.
I think so. Yeah,
99.
Yeah, you're right. It was about the same year, but the idea was that you could share data, download things from the server, and in this case actually play online with people. And I'm sure if the system took off, there would have been way more games that would have supported online play.
Right. But it was kind of a train wreck waiting to happen, right? What went wrong with the DD? So again, it was supposed to come out in 97. That was the original date that it was supposed to release. So I don't know if you've ever seen the YouTube creator Metal Jesus Rocks. He had this video where somebody brought him a prototype of the N64DD, a US retail kind of prototype, and it had a copyright in 1997. So they had planned to get this thing out in 97, but just due to a lot of weird delays, it didn't make its way ever here, but it came out very, very late in Japan. It was never really clear why Nintendo held back that release. There's some thoughts saying that, they were waiting for the Nintendo to kind of get to this peak level where it was just really exploding, and then, unleash this add-on for it that everybody had to get,
I just don't think they really anticipated the PlayStation being quite as huge as it was.
And that was one of the big, I think, problems with it, is that they kind of overshot themselves, right? They overthought and kind of overestimated what they had done, because, the Super Nintendo was so successful, and the Satellaview was reasonably successful, right? It wasn't a major hit, but also technology was, fairly early there. So
that's true.
Hard to say where it could have gone, right?
Early efforts in a network broadcast play, kind of like a Sega Channel and stuff like that. We might talk about that in another episode.
Right. Another thing was probably lack of interest from developers. It seemed like developers just weren't on board with it. Not only did you have to know the N64 development tools, but you had to know now this new attachments development tools kit as well. It's just a lot of extra overhead.
Yeah, other than this, I think it was SimCity 64 and one other game that wasn't a Nintendo first-party title.
Right. There were a lot of things wrong with the system, and over the course of the N64's life, cart memory increased. So towards the end, there were I want to say there was 4 or 5 N64 cart-based games that had 64 megabytes of memory in them, and that already is equal to what the disk drive had. So
it defeats its advantage, basically. Yeah,
you've lost everything there, and there wasn't enough. I would even say it was more doomed than the Virtual Boy. I know that's a stretch, but I think it kind of just didn't work out. All right, so those were all the failures or shortcomings with the disk drive, but it did kind of have its place, right? There was a lot of kind of future echoes or ideas that Nintendo would kind of circle back around to. If we look at stuff like experimental stuff like Mario Artist, we mentioned that before. It wasn't just Mario Paint redone. There were a lot of parts of it, and the avatar creation, which could have been like a precursor to the Mii creation,
right?
Thing,
yeah,
or even just the interface.
Yeah, and there's a mini game in Mario Artist Polygon Studio, which is just a coffee break, which is these 5-second mini games in succession, which a few years later you'd see in WarioWare as a whole game around it.
Right. So I think there were some good ideas that came out of it from Nintendo's end.
Yeah, it didn't really do well at market, but it was an interesting experiment, and And
sometimes that's the best for companies to experiment with stuff and have those failures to learn, right?
Right, and they were able to bounce back, obviously. I mean, here we are today. Nintendo's still huge. I mean, the Switch is crazy big.
Right, and Shigeru Miyamoto, he gave this interview, and he said, one big thing about the real-time clock is that, and I think this is on the Wikipedia page or something, he said, the real-time clock would allow us to create these worlds that just consistently move even when your system's off. And that sounds exactly like what they did with Animal Crossing. Even though that made a cartridge port, it still, I mean, that became, we still play these games today, right? If it wasn't for that experimentation, we wouldn't have had that.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we get into a little bit more music? This is Spirit of a Champion, composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa. That was Spirit of a Champion, composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa for Japan Pro Golf Tour 64 on the 64DD.
I like the drum kit that comes in at the end. There was a little unexpected. I really, really do not like those horn samples. It's just, they sound too... God,
Yeah.
And this isn't the first game that uses those. I think those are just like the pre-built-in patches there, but it kind of...
Yeah,
a little bit.
I know what you mean. And when that first opening happens with the like cheesy ball game organ sound, I'm like,
This is not Ken'ichiro Shinzawa to me. Like this is not his best work. It's not a bad track though. I think the overall design is good.
It picks up. Yeah, it's got a really good,
and it's meant to be triumphant. It's meant to be like you won. You know, like this is,
you cleared the course. You beat your competitors. You got a lower par.
That's a golf term, right?
Yeah, it is. So let's bring it back around.
But yeah, let's move into our next track. This is Becoming a Master, composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa. There's my boy. He's back.
I know,
that was Becoming a Master from Ken'ichiro Shinzawa for Japan Pro Golf Tour 64. Dude, this was an awesome track.
I know. Dropped lots of really unexpected things in there, like those lengthy extended chord arpeggios going down, and just like swells of things coming in slowly, and then bam, like something comes and hits you. Like, whoa, what was that?
Right. That bass, it's a little bit flat for a reason. I think it's supposed to have this kind of like this kind of dirty sound to it, almost like kind of this live freeform jazz, right? It has to have this kind of nastiness behind it to kind of bring out that front end, and then they all kind of start intertwining and just becomes this just fun track to listen to. Totally chill.
It made me think, like, I can imagine being in the studio or you know, in your office thinking, how do I impart the elements of jazz and improvisation into a track that's going to loop like every couple of minutes? And so, you know, that's why you have some of these little hits and these things that kind of come in and
little drum fills and
exactly, yeah. And so when it comes back around, it's still like a little bit jarring, but in a like a spicy way. You know, it surprises you. So it's a really cool track.
Yeah. So a little bit more about the game. I first played it in I played it in emulator because it's the only thing I got.
Yeah.
And it looked amazing because of all the glide plugins and stuff. But if you look at like screenshots, and we're kind of going through the manual. In fact, that's where we get a lot of our research was from the actual manual. Somebody put it up on archive.org, and it's really interesting. So you look at this, and it's N64 3D, man. It's blurry. It's got that kind of
low poly texture kind of thing. A lot of
fuzz,
a lot of 2D on top of the 3D. You know, all the text.
Right, but I will say, one thing it doesn't have is that N64 fog. The courses you can see all the way to the end. It's pretty clear. There is a lot of texturing around the environment. So they spend a lot of time creating these courses to kind of look like the real golf courses. And I think that attention to detail kind of shows. So
yeah, and the sun actually casts real shadows on the golfers. They're quite long if it's at certain angles, and you know it looks like the shape of the golfer's body.
Yeah,
which you know those effects were probably not so groundbreaking.
It's novel now,
but it's an attention to detail that you didn't always see back then. So that's kind of cool.
Otherwise, you got your different stats on the screen. You have on the right hand side, you have this kind of course overview, which reminds me a lot of Neo Turf Masters because that game really utilized that. Even on the Neo Geo Pocket Color, you had that kind of side map, and this game uses the same thing. It's got its swing meter, and so when the golfer you kind of get this front view when he's doing his swing, and you can place where you want to chip the ball, and everything is kind of easy to see. Again, it's very much Hot Shots, maybe like Tiger Woods or something like that.
It's a little bit different in that when you're actually swinging, you see sort of the arc of the swing behind you. Like there's a sort of 3/4 circle that's semi-transparent that shows you where you're going to swing, and you actually hold the stick instead of just pressing
right.
Like
you
the
kind
A
of
button.
swing it like a golf club.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and I've heard just from reading reviews and playing a little bit of it, it's not like that precise. It's not meant to be a stressful, serious simulation where you have to be pitch perfect to actually hit the ball.
Right. What I would have liked to do is I played Hot Shots Golf 2-player a lot. I played with a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And then ended up playing online, I think, for the PSP.
I played the Vita one a lot.
I
forget what it's
I played
called.
the Vita
World
one too.
International. It's a really good game.
Right. I would have really been interested to see how people played this on over the 28.8 Randnet modem. The Randnet, it's really interesting. So in April of 1999, Nintendo ended their partnership with ST Giga, which had done the Super Famicom's proprietary Satellaview online service in 95 all the way to 2000. And then the company partnered with Japanese media company Recruit to develop the 64DD's completely new proprietary online service called the Randnet. And that came from Recruit and Nintendo Network. Again, with these names.
Yeah, the consolidation of these sort of half acronyms. Yeah.
It's really bad. So what Randnet did is it allowed gamers to surf the internet, including like this members only portal. So you could log in, much like how Sega did it with the Dreamcast. You had the network CD or the online CD, and you can go and have Sega's website, and you have like this little like game portals and stuff
and check
like
your
that.
Messages, load games, check your data,
Right.
This is not by any means the only system that experimented with the multimedia era, the 3DO, even the Dreamcast to an extent, the Sega Genesis. Everybody was trying to figure out what was that right combination of online features and gaming features and trying to put it together in a package. And there are a lot of failures in that 90s era,
Right. I would say that the company that actually got it right was Sega with the Dreamcast. I think that was the one console that really got online right. And it worked really, really well.
Yeah, but of course that wasn't their first try. So, it takes time.
They got it right the third time. the third time. But let's go ahead and get into another track. This is Final Score, and this is composed again by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa. that was Final Score from Japan Pro Golf Tour 64.
You know, again, not too much to say about this track. It definitely feels like you can breathe a sigh of relief. You know, you're tallying up your score. Hopefully you won. You're not going to throw your clubs out into the green.
Snap Happy Gilmore style. No, I mean, cool. Yeah, I don't got much to say.
No. We wanted to include it because there's really only about 10 tracks in the game. I think there's exactly 10 tracks in the game, not including all the little jingles. So I figured we'd give it a chance and play it.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah. Let's move on to our next one. This is Completing the Course. And this is composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa. That was Completing the Course from Japan Pro Golf Tour 64. This is goes back to the jazz, big time.
You know, it starts off. It's kind of rearranging some elements from another track, just like the first 30 seconds, and then it kind of goes off into its own thing. There's that one chord like right in the beginning where it starts off sounding really happy, and then it just like has a little bit of suspense into it. I thought that was a really cool way to set up the rest of the track.
Yeah, there's a lot of design in it that is interesting, and you can totally see the jazz brain that he has.
Yeah, a lot of notes are played slightly out of time, or slightly behind the beat, but very intentionally, because it's like most of it is on time.
You'll hear it a second time, and you know that it was an intentional thing. Especially, I don't know what instrument that was that kind of come in and has those dropping notes. It's like
it's pluckiness, right? Is that one?
Kind of, yeah. And again, that one's also played kind of off the standard tempo, and I think that he's just really creative with what instruments he decides to kind of follow that pattern, what don't. Yeah, but great track. So the people that played this game, we did find a few reviews.
Yeah, and actually
there's some big 64DD communities, surprisingly, and some people actually took the time to review the game.
Yeah, so there were two reviews that I found, one from 2000 and one from 2005. So actually close-ish to the release in some ways. The one from 2005 is from a site called Defunct Games, which covers a lot of sports games and sort of old sim titles and things like that. This one comes from Ferry Gronendijk, and he praised it for its import friendliness, the variety of modes, the smooth and intuitive gameplay that's fun for novices and pros alike. He does criticize the flat textures on the crowds and scenery, but says that overall it's a really solid golf game that's pretty easy to play and a lot of fun. And you probably figured that most of the reason for the textures was because it was a game made in 98 and just pushed out a couple of years.
That's probably what it was.
The second review from Per Schneider from IGN in September of 2000 has this to say about the game. On the audio side, the game is less impressive.
Boo.
While the classical opening music is nice, the rest of the game is accompanied by cheesy Casio synth pop. But the biggest disappointment is the lack of voice commentary.
That does kind of suck.
That does feel like it should have been included, especially since they did have a few years.
But I'll tell you what, like Hotshot's voice commentary, it was so obnoxious that I wish I could have just not had it. So,
yeah,
hole in one, and like you did it, like that would be it. I was like, oh my
and
god!
Especially in the English versions, like I don't know, maybe it's a little bit better in the original Japanese.
No, because I played the Japanese one and it's horrible.
Oh yeah, it's Birdie and all that. Yeah, it's like all that stuff. So and he closed out with this, which I thought was kind of a little bit mean, but. It's a shame Media Factory got suckered into making this for the 64DD. Japan Pro Golf Tour is a well-rounded golf sim for players who can't get themselves to try the arcade-style Mario Golf.
Right, because this is around the same time.
It was. I think the first Mario Golf was around
Nintendo
99?
just squashed it right away. Yeah.
So, yeah, basically, I think a lot of people were clued into the fact that it probably should have just come out for the 64 and it would have had a wider audience. And, you know, it's funny. I was looking this up because of that thing we mentioned earlier about how limited the release was. This is the most expensive game on the 64DD.
How much does it go for?
Over $500.
Oh my god!
Like I was looking at a pricing chart for some of the games, and the listing for other 64DD games is like $50.
Dude, so I used to think that this system was just so rare and like this weird kind of hidden console system or add-on. And when I was in Japan, I saw them on shelves, and it just wasn't a big deal. And like I remember, like I went to a shop in Nagoya, I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago, and then just like last year I was back and it was still there, like the exact same one. Like nobody cares, you know. There's nothing to play on it really. I mean,
no,
unless you want
really.
like Doshin the Giant or Mario Artist, but
you could play Doshin on the GameCube and it's probably better there.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so this next track I wanted to save for pretty close to the end of the show. This is Going for Par, composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa.
All right, that was Going for Par, composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa for Japan Pro Golf Tour 64 on the 64DD. Pretty wild little track.
You know, it's not the most melodic of all of the tracks, but this is like what you'd talked about. This is a jazz musician. This is him playing around. You can really hear his personality.
Right.
And
it's almost like he doesn't care. He's just like,
I'm just going to put together a track.
Yeah, he's just doing what he likes to do.
Yeah, it's, you know, that intro reminds me a lot of Transport Tycoon, which immediately, ever since Brian put me onto that soundtrack, I've been like, it is my go-to work music when I need an hour of uninterrupted time. And like one of the first tracks on the album, if you're just playing like a YouTube playlist, is something that sounds just like that. So clearly there was something going on around that time that all of the jazz musicians were listening to. I got to find it. I got to find that source.
Yeah. And they were all like getting into game audio too or something.
Yeah, it's like it's got like a jammy like a jam sort of feel to it. It's like it's jazz, but it's very improvisational.
I'm just gonna guess here. He probably just got together with a few friends. He's like, hey, pick up the bass over there. I'm gonna grab
just
the
play
keyboard.
like an easy lick over there.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna jam over on the keyboards.
You know what? There's our on par track. Going
Print
for it.
Ship it.
Yeah,
it's done.
Going for par. That does sound pretty. Maybe I just don't know enough about golf. But going for par just sounds like going for a C+.
Well, that sometimes it's really hard, right? You're going for a super long course, getting 4 shots with crazy conditions might be pretty complicated. So.
Yeah, it reminds me, like I play this game with Ed online. It's been a while since we played, but there's this mini golf game that we play online, and like I'm happy if I get par because it's so hard, man.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes we're like 10 over par and like it defaults because it's like, nope, you aren't going to get yourself out of this hole. Sorry.
Yeah. Some of the golf games, they lull you into a false sense of security. You start playing and it's like, oh, I got this. So I'm like 5 under par. And then the later courses, it's like, it takes you 10 attempts before you even get anywhere close.
Right. So question for you.
Yes.
What's your favorite golf game of all time?
Honestly, I really liked World Invitational a lot. That I sunk a lot of hours into that game. It's just really well designed, and every golf game I've been playing after that is like it's basically the same thing.
Right. I would say Hot Shots 2, Hot Shots Golf 2 on the PlayStation. That was a good one for me. I played that a lot.
Same company.
Yeah,
I think it's the same folks.
They're all the same folks. It's like all Camelot.
Pretty much.
They do them all.
There's like 2 companies.
Same
that
with
make
Mario Golf. It's the same kind of thing, and they figured out the method that works, and they just do it every single time the same way, and it's like nobody complains because they're all good. So.
Yeah, I just hope they don't add microtransactions because those games, when they get their hooks in me, I'm like, I'm just gonna spend whatever.
You said it. It's gonna happen now. You want to buy it like
I'll buy a golf
next
club,
Mario Golf Club. It's like $1.99. Oh, anyways, so cool soundtrack, right? Kind of a weird find that you came across. I'm glad we talked about it today. It was bound to happen eventually. We're going to do something on the 64D. It was either this or Mario Artist, which has a really eclectic soundtrack. So this was a nice, smooth, chill thing to kind of listen to together.
One of the reasons why we picked this was because we wanted something a little bit more low-key, because we've got a lot of cool stuff that's going on right now.
Right. So we do have a few announcements. We mentioned in the last episode that we had kind of a bigger one, and this is a really big one for us. So we are going to be doing a live panel or an opening talk for the Library of Congress. They are doing a celebration of game audio and kind of introduction. It's the first time they're doing something like this at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., and they invited us to come talk about game audio, and so we're going to be doing the opening panel.
Yeah, it's a series of events that's happening over the weekend of April 4th, 5th, 6th. We're actually going on April 5th at around 7 o'clock.
Right.
You can actually check the Library of Congress website today, and it'll say there's a pre-concert talk. I don't know if the details are all filled out at this time, but
yeah, but we have our plane tickets. We're headed out there. So.
Contracts are signed. We're ready to go. So we'll be announcing it in broader places on social media and to our various partners.
And the great thing is, because it's Library of Congress, we are going to be able to distribute it freely. So the episode that we record, there's going to be less audio in it because of we're already in a kind of a gray area.
It's going to be a little bit different from our usual show format, maybe a little bit more
history focused.
Yeah, but we'll still have some audio examples. And
right. I think it'll be a fun audio show anyways. You don't have to be there, but we will have some slides and we'll include those in the show notes when we do release it.
But if you are in the DC area on April 5th and you want to come see the show, come join us at the Library of Congress. We'd love to chat with you afterwards.
Right. We are going to be doing a interview with Robert Holmes coming up soon. And that's another episode that is really going to be a lot of fun, because Robert Holmes spent a lot of time and did a lot of stuff for Sierra Online, and this company kind of shaped the game industry in the 90s. And it was a very prolific developer, and they were able to just create a lot of enriching experiences. And I think being able to talk with him is going to be a lot of fun. So
Absolutely.
Looking forward to that too.
Yeah, I mean, they were a pillar of the American gaming landscape. I mean,
Big
really,
time.
like
Totally.
we have Squaresoft and companies like that in Japan, and here it was Sierra. I mean, they were huge for 20 years.
Yeah, and it also looks like we are going to be talking to another composer quite soon, Japanese composer, and so we will provide some more details as we get closer to that. We've got a lot coming in the next few months, man.
When it rains, it pours. We've had a lot of cool stuff come our way in a very short period of time, and we're really, really excited to announce a little bit more once we have some more details nailed on that last one.
Right. So today we covered Japan Pro Golf Tour for the 64DD, composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa. Fabulous soundtrack and a lot of fun to go through together.
Absolutely. And I love those Casio sounds. So
yeah, me too.
I don't mind that it's a little bit on the hokier side. The compositions are straight solid.
Yeah, well, I don't think Per is a big fan of game audio as much as we are anyway, so maybe he didn't really listen. So.
Or maybe he'll come back around when he listens to the show.
We'll see. If you want to know more about the show, you can find us online at pixelatedaudio.com for our show notes. The tracks that we played today, and we're also on Twitter at Pixelated Audio, and of course on Discord. The link to the server is on our website, so join in, come chat with us about game audio and composers and all sorts of fun music related stuff.
If you want to leave comments or feedback, you can leave a note for us on our website, or you can chat with us on Discord. We're very open and very active on that channel, so we'd love to hear what you have to say. If you have anything that you're interested in hearing, we'll try to put it on the show if we can.
Yeah, and we're trying to get more of the suggestion stuff kind of knocked out this year, because there's a lot of really great stuff that you guys have mentioned to us or been interested in hearing kind of our teardown of it. And I think that's a really good thing for us to kind of tackle, because there's a lot of really good soundtracks that we just haven't gotten to yet. And so looking forward to that. If you're new to our show, check out some of our past stuff. Like episode 96, we did a feature on Tetris DS, which was a lot of fun. Episode 69, which was Neo Turf Masters.
And don't forget episode 32, which was Pokemon Snap, another great N64 soundtrack.
I almost forgot about that one. Oh yeah, that's right. We had some unreleased tracks in that episode too. So if you are itching for some more N64 stuff, take a listen and let us know what you think. We got one more track taking out the show, and this is kind of a cool one. What do we got?
We got the staff credits closing out the game and closing out the show.
Yeah.
Composed by Ken'ichiro Shinzawa.
Love it. See you guys in a few weeks for the next episode.
Take it easy.
Ken'ichiro, Nintendo wants their Ocarina of Time soundtrack back.
First he's golfing on Hyrule Fields. Now he's riding his horse to the next.
That's his golf cart.
Yeah, his caddy is I don't know.
The Deku Nut.